Well, what a delight for me to have as a very special guest, Phyllis Schlafly. I'm sure that's a name you have heard and seen and seen her on television, read her books. She is a terrific lady, the founder and the president of Eagle Forum. She's written quite a few books. I've had really the high honor of serving with her on a few of the platform committees and conventions past. I just told her a few moments ago I've also received the prestigious Eagle Forum Award when I was chairman of the Oregon Republican Party. And Mrs. Schlafly, what a delight to have you back with us today.
Well, thank you very much.
First of all, I'd like to talk to you about your recent concern and the call for the resignation or the removal of Karl Rove. I know that you really were genuinely and rightfully so upset. Fill us in on that.
Well, we had a primary in Missouri, and the voters, by a significant margin, nominated Todd Akin for the U.S. Senate. And let's start over again. Let's start over.
Okay, just go ahead and pick it up right there.
Missouri had a primary recently, and the Republican voters nominated Todd Akin for the U.S. Senate candidate to oppose Claire McCaskill. He won by a significant majority, and I think most Missourians are really ticked off at the out-of-state people who are telling us who our candidate should be. After all, that's up to Missouri to decide, and they picked Todd Akin, and I think they're sticking with him despite an unfortunate remark that he made. But there are plenty of candidates who said unfortunate things, and I thought what Karl Rove said in an attempt to force him out of the race was really out of line. I've watched politics for a long time, and it's the first time I ever heard any Republican mention the murder of a candidate. It isn't a joke, it isn't funny, it's out of line.
Well, and in the meantime, Mr. Akin went on to clarify his statement and apologize for the misunderstanding, and for some cases that's enough, but for him it didn't seem to be.
No, it didn't seem to be, and Karl Rove's explanation for his remark about the murder of Todd Akin was that he wouldn't have said it if he had known a reporter was present. Well, that's no explanation at all. Right. The kind of advice he is giving some of these high-priced donors.
Wow. Well, I want to go to your book. This is your latest book. It's called No Higher Power, Obama's War on Religious Freedom. There's a picture of it there on the screen. And let me encourage folks to take a look at it at Barnes & Noble or check it out on Amazon.com. By the way, it comes with some great reviews from Mark Levin, David Horowitz, and David Limbaugh. And, of course, Phyllis Schlafly pulls no punches when it comes to writing about these topics. And I know, like me, you're deeply concerned about the potential and certainly the squeeze on religious freedom in the United States and how it's increased under this president. How bad is it from your perspective, Mr. Schlafly?
We had a big push to what Obama is doing in his plan to fundamentally transform the United States when the Democratic Platform Committee omitted God from its platform, which it had always had reference to in previous conventions. And then they had a vote in the convention to restore it, and that was pretty funny. I don't know if you and your listeners watched it, but they called for the vote to put God back into the Democratic platform, and it was a voice vote, and it sounded like it was pretty well divided, or maybe more people voting no. And the chairman took the voice vote 3 times, and finally he just called it. It was a motion that required a 2/3 vote. They clearly did not have a 2/3 vote. So I guess that the people who were running the convention wanted to be politically correct with their president. And we know that one of the things that Obama has done is to try to eliminate God and religion from everything in public life. When he quotes from the Declaration of Independence, he omits the word creator. When he issues his Thanksgiving Day address, he thanks a lot of people, but somehow God didn't make the cut. When he went to give an address at Georgetown University, he insisted that they cover up the Latin initials of Jesus Christ, so we wouldn't see that over the podium when he was speaking. And then one of the most offensive was when his lawyers for the EEOC demanded that a Lutheran school hire somebody that the school didn't want to hire. Well, who is the government to tell the Lutheran school who to have as a teacher in its school? So Obama is trying to establish a rule that is okay for the church itself. That is, if you go inside your church and shut the door, you can say a prayer. He's not going to bother you. But any institution that a religious denomination runs, like a school or a college or a hospital, has to submit to the higher power of the federal government to do whatever they want.
Well, Mr. Schlafly, this has left the faith community in somewhat of a quandary because this president is calling himself a Christian. And we don't know how to respond in the fact that he's doing exactly what you're saying he's doing, and he's fundamentally taking away religious rights in this country. And we're watching this happen by a man who calls himself a Christian. How are we to respond?
Well, I want to tell you, my book, No Higher Power, does not purport to tell what's in his heart or what his relationship with God is. It simply sets forth what he has said and what he has done. And I think the judgment can be made by the American people that that is not what we want. We like to pledge allegiance to one nation under God. And we like to have monuments and pictures of the Ten Commandments in public places. We certainly like to have these crosses honoring our veterans on many public grounds. And I don't know what's in his heart, but I do know what he said and what he hasn't said. And I think we're entitled to make a judgment about that. I do believe he is trying to fundamentally transform the United States as a totally secular country in which you're not permitted to mention Christianity or religion in any public place, public courthouse, public school, or anything where other people can hear.
What do you think a second term, Obama's second term, would mean to religious freedoms and to religious groups in this country?
Well, I think religious liberty is at risk, and that's why I called my book, No Higher Power, Obama's War on Religious Freedom. For example, the mandate that he has imposed on all Christian hospitals and in fact, all employers, most all employers, to say that they must provide free abortion drugs and contraceptives and sterilization procedures for all their employees, free. Now, that's contrary to the conscience of a lot of people. And again, Obama's position is there's no higher power than the executive branch of the federal government.
Why do you think this president seemingly has gone unchecked? It appears to me that it's clearly abuse of powers, and he's outside of the conscience of the Constitution, and certainly outside the conscience of most Americans.
Well, it is curious, but he said at the beginning he wanted to fundamentally transform the United States, and there's nothing more fundamental than accepting that our rights come from God, not from the government, and that we believe we are one nation under God, that God has blessed us more than any other country. That's what the majority of Americans believe. And he seems to want to take us away from that and say that we are all dependent on the government. And his whole policy has been, his spending policy, his debt policy, has been to increase the percentage of the American people who are dependent on the federal government, on the taxpayers' money for their ordinary living expenses. It's up to 47% now. And we can't survive as a nation thinking that we look to the government. As Ronald Reagan said, the government is not the solution to our problems. The government is the problem.
Right. You know, I watched that vote happen live, and I have to tell you, a chill went down my spine when I saw this crowd yell no to putting God back into the platform, and they did it 3 times, and each time the voice vote got louder and louder. There was no way they had 2/3 of that vote, and as you know now, as you look on the teleprompter, that thing was pre-scripted. Do you think there will be any further fallout just on the point of order or what happened there?
Well, I think it's made my book, No Higher Power, very timely. A woman came up to me at an Eagle Forum meeting last night and said, this is the most important book I ever read. And there are a lot of good books about Obama, taking us into European-style socialism, taking us into debt that will be an albatross around the necks of our grandchildren. But no other book addresses this matter of religious liberty, and it is fundamental to our country. And so I would urge your listeners to get it, and especially after you read it, give it to your pastor, because they're the ones who need to be emboldened to talk about the danger to religious liberty.
A picture of it there on the screen called No Higher Power, Obama's War on Religious Freedom by Phyllis Schlafly, founder and president of Eagle Forum. Again, check it out at Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com, maybe even Evangel, put out by Rigoneri Press. Mr. Schlafly, why hasn't there been a greater pushback by the faith community on some of this stuff?
Well, a lot of them are simply intimidated by the lawsuits that have been filed by the ACLU and various atheist organizations. And they're also intimidated by people threatening to say they might lose the tax exemption for their church if they speak too loudly. And you know, if you've seen some of the pictures of what happened at the time of the American Revolution, the preachers were leading the fight. Right. You have a lot of pictures of preachers who tell the congregation that they had to fight for independence, and then he picks up his gun and marches out, and the congregation follows him. And I think we depend on the preachers for a lot of leadership, and a lot of them have been intimidated by IRS, Internal Revenue, and I don't think they need to be. They don't even need to mention Obama's name if they just show what is being done by our government at the present time, and that it is a great encroachment on our religious liberty.
Well, it's just an amazing thing. As I watched the Democratic National Convention, it seemed to be the party of killing babies, the party of same-sex marriages, the party of just things that are outside human conscience. What we saw in the earlier speeches, and then we saw a prime time speech, somebody said, well, they airbrushed prime time, but the real party is what you saw before the cameras turned on at 7 o'clock.
That's right, and as you point out, abortion, tax-funded abortion, is in their platform. Same-sex marriage, for the first time, is in their platform. And the overwhelming majority of the American people are opposed to same-sex marriage and are opposed to tax-funded abortions. And yet they endorse both of them. So it is a very clear choice in the election coming up. And the other thing is that he has grabbed so much power into himself. You know, there were attorneys general of 9 states that issued a statement about the 21 illegal or unconstitutional things that this president has done. And then since then, he's done more of them through the mandate on hospitals that I mentioned, and through his trying to change the welfare law and trying to change the immigration law. These are clearly illegal actions contrary to what Congress voted. And we just can't get, we don't want one-man government in this country.
Well, Mr. Schlafly, thank you. You have been a warrior for many, many years, and I was honored to serve with you on some of those occasions. Keep up the fight. Thank you. Congratulations on your book. And there's a picture of it on the screen. Hopefully our viewers and listeners will get a copy of it. No Higher Power, Obama's War on Religious Freedom by Phyllis Schlafly. Thank you so much. You and your team and your entire staff remain in our prayers. God bless you.
Thank you, and you can go to eagleforum.org.